The Atari Jaguar had 64 bits of power. That's more than the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo combined, and it's double the PS1 and the Sega Saturn. 64 is more than 32, so that means it's better. You do the math. Let's talk about the co-op games. White Men Can't Jump is considered to be one of the worst games on the Jaguar. And you know what? I'm not going to argue with that. You can play it in co-op doing 2-on-2. It's one of the few games to offer support for the Jaguar Team Tap. So you can play this game in 4-player, competitive, 2-on-2, I guess. I don't know why anyone would actually want to try that, as this game sucks. The visuals suck, the gameplay sucks. It's a terrible game. Dragon the Bruce Lee Story is a fighting game where you can play as 2 different Bruce Lees and team up against one other opponent. So it's a 2-on-1 fighting game. Sometimes I think this works really well. This isn't one of those times. This game sucks. The controls are slow and just feel delayed. None of the moves are easy to pull off. Somehow I actually beat this game in co-op a few years ago. I haven't been able to do that again, and I don't have the patience to ever try it again. The AI is way too good here, and you know what? I give up. I just don't want to even try to get good at this game. It's a real piece of shit. Why are there so many bad Bruce Lee games? Fever Pitch is just a basic soccer game. You could play it co-op against the AI. Graphics are decent, I guess. I don't know. If you like soccer, try this out. Air Cars is another game that supports the Jag Link. So it doesn't have a local co-op feature, but if you have 2 Atari Jaguars, 2 copies of Air Cars, and the Jag Link, you can play this in a system link fashion. Air Cars is a 3-dimensional shooter that is primarily played from a first-person perspective. This is another game on the Jaguar that seems promising, but the execution was less than great. Unfortunately, the multiplayer capabilities can't save this one, as it's just another slow-paced space shooter like Cybermorph. Hoverstrike is a 3D tank shooter. So basically you just drive around and shoot other robotic creatures. Player 2 can control a cursor, and the graphics are, below average. The frame rate is also below average, and the gameplay is terrible. We also have NBA Jam Tournament Edition. This isn't a bad version of NBA Jam, but yeah, NBA Jam is on every console ever, so let's just move on. Doom for the Atari Jaguar is one of the first home console versions of the game, and it's not bad for what it is. Even though it lacks music in some of the levels of the PC version, it still plays pretty well. But one cool feature of the Atari Jaguar version is it had a system link. So if you had 2 Atari Jaguars and 2 copies of Doom and 2 TVs, you could system link them up and play this whole game in co-op. Or at least until the Jag Link disconnected. Apparently there was a problem with that. The game would get disrupted, so you might not actually get a chance to play through the whole game at all. But let's be real, probably no one ever had 2 Atari Jaguars and 2 copies of Doom and a Jag Link in the same room at the same time to even try this out. I know I haven't. Someday, maybe I'll try it. The very first Raiden was also released on the Atari Jaguar, and it's a pretty decent port of the arcade shoot 'em up. Basically, you just fly around, shoot the enemies down, gather power-ups, go to space, beat the game. It's one of the few shoot 'em ups I can actually complete without cheat codes at all, and that in and of itself is an accomplishment as far as I'm concerned. I do really like this version of the game, but it's definitely not as good as the arcade version or the PS1 port. But when we're talking about Atari Jaguar games and you're seeing what the other options are for co-op gaming, this definitely is better than most of the other games. Before I get to the #1 best co-op Atari Jaguar game, I wanted to talk about some of the aftermarket games that also include co-op. The classic top-down run-and-gun shooter, Chaos Engine, was ported to the Atari Jaguar, and this was done really well. It's pretty faithful to the home computer ports. There's not much else to say about it. If you enjoy Chaos Engine, here it is, and you can play it on your Jaguar now. Similarly, there is a port of Gauntlet II. This is a port of the Atari ST version. Total Carnage was an arcade game that was basically a spiritual successor to Smash TV. It's a twin-stick, top-down shooter where you just run around and shoot lots of enemies. There's lots of violence and lots of action. The Atari Jaguar version is actually a homebrew cartridge that was released in 2005, so it's not an original release. But it's a faithful port of the arcade game, although it is missing some of the in-game music. I like Total Carnage, but I've always liked Smash TV quite a bit more. This game just feels way too hard. Rebooteroids is a Asteroids clone, and it can be played in co-op. Unfortunately, you don't each get to control your own ship. You actually split up the tasks where one player controls the ship and the other player controls the aiming and shooting. This is pretty basic, but if you do enjoy Asteroids, it's a pretty solid experience. Jag Zombies and Jag Zombies 2 are two games that are zombie-filled light gun shooters, but without light guns, as the Atari Jaguar didn't have a light gun. I don't know if there is an aftermarket peripheral that allows you to play this game with a light gun, but I just played it with the cursor, and it's still pretty fun. The visuals are pretty simple, but I did like the pixelated art style. If you're a fan of the House of the Dead series, this might be right up your alley. But don't get your hopes up too much, as it's a pretty low budget game, but definitely worth trying. A game that's currently in development but looks promising is called Hammer of the Gods. It's a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up, which is something that's sorely missing on the Atari Jaguar, so I'm glad to see one finally coming to the system. The visuals have a pre-rendered look that I'm not necessarily a big fan of. I do think that the backgrounds are appealing. From the limited gameplay I've seen, it does look a little bit slow and kind of low budget, but it's still a work in progress. So hopefully they iron out some of the quirks and fine tune it and make it look a lot more polished when it finally comes out. But I am looking forward to this one. BattleSphere is a 3D space shooter, I guess. It's not completely unlike Star Wars Arcade. You're just flying around in space. A second player controls a little cursor to help you double up the firepower. Honestly, the gameplay is not terrible here, but it just lacks a lot of variety, especially with the visuals. You mostly just see stars. You're just flying around and literally everything looks the same. So it's just not visually appealing, and it ends up making the gameplay boring as well. It just doesn't stand out, but it's not a bad game. But the best co-op game on the Atari Jaguar, without a doubt, is Tempest 2000. I'm not just saying that, as most Atari Jaguar games aren't very good. This is actually a really great game, whether it's on the Jaguar or any other system. This takes the old school gameplay of Tempest and updates it. And you can even play it in co-op. In modern days, people have actually modified Atari Jaguar controllers to turn them into a spinner controller so that you could actually play this game just like the arcade version. Someday I want to get my hands on 2 of those so I can play this game the way it was meant to be played. But if you're not familiar with Tempest, basically it's like a space shooter, but you move around this shape, and as you're moving, you shoot down the line and hit the invaders that are coming towards you. It offers a unique perspective visually, as well as some unique gameplay that was definitely a standout for the time. I actually really love this game. I could sink hours into this. Playing this with a friend, it becomes quite addicting. And even though the visuals are pretty basic, they hold up well. They're not trying to do anything fancy like Hoverstrike or BattleSphere, some of the other games of the era trying to push 3D graphics. It just has simple shapes and simple colors. It's all about the gameplay here. So if I were to recommend one game for the Atari Jaguar, it would definitely be Tempest 2000. Whether you play this single player or co-op, it's just a great experience. So those are all of the co-op Atari Jaguar games. There's not a lot of them, and some of these are complete shit. But if you enjoyed this video and you're looking for some other Atari related co-op content, make sure to watch our top 10 co-op Atari 2600 video. We put that one out a while ago, but it's still really great. Thank you for watching.